Mr. Mufamadi, thank you very much for your time. So a lockdown cannot be desirable in a democracy. I think that has been stated by many commentators. Nonetheless, we are in the situation that we are in right now. How has government fared in serving its citizens at such a critical moment?
Well, Toli, as you said, a lockdown is not something that you just decide to impose on the nation. But if you want to contain the spread of a pandemic such as the one we have today, lockdown policies are a must, despite their inherent danger to trump civil liberties. So governments throughout the world are facing a moment of difficult choices, vexed by moral choices that they have to make, and trade-offs.
Yeah.
The need to save lives, balance that with the need to save livelihoods and to maintain and uphold civil liberties.
Yeah. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I'm just trying to speed up this so that we get in as much as is possible. You led the police at a very, very sensitive time in our country when we were transitioning from apartheid to a democratic state. The police this time around, alongside the soldiers, are tasked with enforcing the lockdown regulations. Have they handled this matter with the necessary care?
Now, the particular issue you are raising, it's one of the ongoing challenges or weaknesses which have been spotlighted by the performance of our government when it comes to ensuring that the lockdown is observed by the public. You see, in the earlier days of the new dispensation, we sought to demilitarize the policing culture by promoting a culture of community policing, which means that you would have structures which bring together community representatives and the police to consult on matters of law enforcement, what was called community police forums. Even with our local government system, we provide in that system for the establishment of ward committees. In other words, you always seek to have social compacts which bring in a relationship of cooperation, society and the state. Therefore, when you have that kind of relationship, it becomes less necessary to rely on coercive instrumentalities to enforce the law, but to rely more and more on consent from the public. I think it has become very clear that our law enforcement agencies lack this other component of statecraft, which is the ability to persuade and to win the confidence of the public. This is a matter which doesn't have to wait for the post-COVID-19 situation. This is something that the government, having seen these shortcomings, has to start addressing in earnest.
Let me ask you,
the President.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And I think the President last night. Yes.
Continue.
Okay, Toli. No, I think the President last night was beginning to hint at the fact that there are quite a number of lessons which government has learned from this ongoing attempt to enforce the lockdown. It's important that the ministers take to heart the implications of the President's admission in this regard.
Let's deal now with another element that government is coming under a lot of pressure for, and it is for its conservative approach, some have described it, in as far as the economy is concerned, and the President coming under a lot of hammering there. Is it justified, the criticism against him and the government?
Well, I think the caution that government has shown when it comes to trying to balance all these delicate considerations, it's something that the spirit of prudence necessitates. But perhaps it is true that there may have been an element of conservatism when it came to also having to be bold about some of the steps that need to be taken.
Yeah.
But the responsibility to open the economy, it's a shared responsibility. The companies in the private sector as well as in the public sphere, they need to show that they have been devising exit plans. They need to show that they've been doing this in consultation with organized labor, and that they have also been benefiting from the input and advice of corporate strategists. While government should, of course, be looking at the broader question of reigniting the economy and regenerating economic life for the shorter and the longer term.
Mr. Mufamadi,
so you can't wait.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but in the interest of time, I want to squeeze in this final question, and if you could just answer it very briefly for me. We're seeing behavior, certain behavior from some ministers in government. Case in point, Tito Mboweni, who's now being threatened with disciplinary action from within the ANC for his public utterances. Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams is sitting on suspension. This is something that we did not witness during your time in government. What's your assessment of this behavior, and how should the President deal with it?
Yes, well, I think that we are, as you say correctly, seeing some measure of a breakdown in the spirit of collectivism, which is the spirit that you need to see prevailing amongst people who have chosen to serve in a government whose task it is to work for the promotion of the common good. But I think we need also to acknowledge that they are working in a political ecosystem which is contaminated by the spread of values of consumer individualism. And even you guys in the media do sometimes promote these negative tendencies by carrying out annual ratings of individual performance of ministers. So I'm saying that this is something that incentivizes bad behavior, where people begin to talk in terms of I, me, and myself.
All right.
Now, you don't solve this through just disciplinary action. You solve this by looking carefully at the way you yourselves as a political parties, as government,
Mr. Mufamadi,
are conducting your politics.
I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to have to ask that we leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Former Minister of Safety and Security in government.